Hello and welcome back to another video. This is the 8th episode of story in which Indra and Ashura never looked at each other directly. Even when they died, their chakra was transferred to Senju and Uchiha clan descendants. Hashirama and Madara met the same fate as their forefathers. Watch as Naruto reunites the two families and breaks the bond of hatred that afflicts the elemental nations. Please smash the like and subscribe buttons. Let's get started. Orochimaru. Huh? Jiraiya asked in a low whisper, with a bit of surprise. He certainly wasn't expecting the blonde to ask about him. There was a moment of silence and Naruto saw the toad Sannin stare at the sky with a saddened gaze. A sudden gust of wind passed by them which made Naruto cover his face for a few seconds. Looking back at his godfather, he felt a little down for asking the question. Why do you wish to know about him, Naruto? Jiraiya finally asked firmly, looking towards the blonde. Once again, Naruto stammered, wondering if he must tell him the reasons for his curiosity about Orochimaru. I just want to know why he turned out the way he is. During the time that I was with him, he always spoke about uncovering the secrets of chakra, learning all the jutsus there are, and he seemed particularly immersed in the idea of immortality. He did not speak much to me, but when he did, he always spoke about how different my chakra is compared to all the ninjas he has encountered over the years and that he wanted to uncover the secrets of my body. It was like, he thought about nothing else other than those things. I know, Ka-chan, you and he were teammates earlier and fought for Konoha during the Second Shinobi War. But, I just can't understand why a shinobi like him would abandon his home, the very foundation of will of fire, and become so detached and inhuman. Naruto replied honestly. Till now, he had never spoken about what he had gone through or how he felt during that time with anyone other than Sai. But, he also knew there was no one who knew or understood Orochimaru better than his godfather. Despite being a traitor to his home and abandoning everything he had been taught to believe in, Naruto had noticed that Orochimaru considered his mother and Aji-chan in high regards because of the power they possessed. Jiraiya sighed as he heard Naruto's words. He never did like talking about his relationship with the snake Sannin. During their genin days, Jiraiya would always chase after him, trying to be as cool as him, and in trying to do so, he had found an unlikely friend in him. However, the person who Orochimaru had turned into later was obsessed with the secrets of ninjutsu and chakra and would go to any measures to see his goals accomplished. Even after knowing him for so many years, he never really could figure out what his fellow Sannin really yearned for. He had his guesses, but he was never certain when it came to Orochimaru. Unnoticed by Naruto, Jiraiya smiled slightly as he realized Naruto was willing to talk a little about his feelings during that time. Though he did not like the subject at hand, he would indulge the blonde a bit. Orochimaru was always a quiet one during our time at the academy, and even then, not many people talked to him or hung out with him. He was the smartest person in the class. Be it ninjutsu, taijutsu, or academics, he was always the top student in the class. Even at that young age, he thought as an experienced shinobi. I think it was because of his high intellect that he couldn't talk to children our age back then. But despite all that, he was never cruel or ruthless. He was blunt about the things he thought and believed in, but he never showed off. He was the type of ninja that I always aspired to be back then. Jiraiya said with a nostalgic look on his face. Looking at Naruto's face, Jiraiya understood his train of thoughts. Hard to believe, huh? Jiraiya questioned. Naruto merely nodded, not knowing what to answer. Sitting cross-legged and keeping both his hands behind himself for support, he once again looked at the dimming sky, as if looking for answers himself. He never really thought about his genin days, or rather his troubling past with Orochimaru nowadays. To him, it seemed like a lifetime ago. It was just after the First Shinobi War, that Orochimaru's parent had died on a mission. There was still a lot of tension going on between the Great Five villages. It hadn't been long since the villages were formed and the clans from different lands still festered their hatred against those from Konoha. Shinobis from different villages were extremely hostile against each other. No one knew the details of his parents' death, but since then he began to change. It wasn't much for people to notice, especially for those who didn't know him well. But, I could tell. He began questioning things that no one of our age should have. Despite all of that, he was still loyal to the village and he behaved the same way with Tsunade and I. As the years went on, we fought many battles together for the sake of Konoha and he never showed any signs of ever betraying. He was Sarutobi-sensei's favorite student. Jiraiya stated with a dry chuckle. So, Sandaime Gigi was hurt the most by his actions, any? Naruto questioned. He was intrigued by the stories Jiraiya was telling. It was certainly hard for him to believe that Orochimaru was anything but a cold-blooded person. Yet, from what he had heard so far, he was beginning to understand, maybe a little, of the Snake Sanin's past. That is right. Jiraiya replied grimly. He was appalled when he learnt that Orochimaru had betrayed the village and run off, so, he couldn't even begin to understand what his sensei was going through at that time. Both, Jiraiya and Naruto became quiet as they stared down at the village which was still hustling with people. By now, the sun had already set, and the moon shone brightly over the village. From a non-shinobi's perspective, the village truly symbolized the epitome of beauty and peace. Aji-chan, do you know what Orochimaru did to betray the village? Naruto asked, albeit a little sadly. From the continued silence, he had understood that this was a sore matter for him. But, he still wished to know more about the man. He hated the man for he did to him in the past, but he still wished to know the circumstances which led him to become what he is. Ever since he started training in the shinobi arts, he understood that pain, tragedy and hatred were a constant figure in a shinobi's life. Hearing that question, Jiraiya's face gained a serious look. He glanced towards the blonde for a few seconds without uttering a single word. He didn't know what Orochimaru had done with Naruto during that time, he was sure it wasn't anything good to talk about. But, Naruto was asking an awful lot of questions about his former teammate. Discarding the doubt from his mind, he smiled slightly. He was certain, Naruto would never do anything to endanger the village. Naruto, there are some answers which should never surface to the top, for the sake of others. If the circumstances that led to Orochimaru betraying the village became public knowledge, it would bring chaos among the villagers of Konohagakure no Sato. Most of the Jounin and even several of the high-ranking officials are not aware of the circumstances which led to him fleeing. Jiraiya said authoritatively. Seeing Naruto's face, he raised his hand, to stop him from saying anything further. Naruto's eyes widened a little upon seeing Jiraiya's face. So, he obliged and kept quiet. I didn't think Aji-chan would get angry if I had asked about him, thought Naruto as he lowered his head. Yes, I am aware why he left, but I don't think you are ready for it here yet. Jiraiya stated firmly. Understanding what his Aji-chan was saying, Naruto didn't ask any further questions. He realized it must be a village secret, which he was not at liberty to give away. Lying down on the ground, he closed his eyes to clear his head a little. He felt at peace, as the slight breeze hit his face, giving him a tingling sensation in his body. Answer me something, Naruto. Jiraiya asked with his eyes focused on the ocean of stars in the night sky. What is it, Aji-chan? Naruto asked casually. Are we humans because we gaze at the stars or do we gaze at the stars because we are humans? Naruto raised an eyebrow at the question but didn't say anything. He simply laid his eyes out at the stars and pondered about it. His young mind could not really process the answer precisely as it could be seen from the thoughtful look on his face. Both sat quietly for more than 10 minutes, before Jiraiya eventually got up. Let's get back home, Naruto. Your mother must be wondering where you are. It has become quite late. Jiraiya said with a slight shudder. Tsunade was a little too protective of her son. Hi Aji-chan. Naruto replied as he giggled lightly. 2 days later it was late in the morning and Naruto lay comfortably in his bed under the warmth of his blanket. As he slowly opened his eyes, he immediately put his hand above his face to block the sunlight from hitting his eyes. As a few seconds passed by, he sat up on the bed with a somewhat tried look. He yawned lazily and stretched his hands. He could still feel the soreness from last evening's taijutsu practice which he had with his mother. He knew his mother was among the finest shinobi in the elemental nations when it came to taijutsu, but he didn't think she would be so hard on him. Damn. Most my body is still sore from the beating I took. I really do need to focus more on my physical strength, thought Naruto as he released a tired sigh. It was true indeed. The past few years, Naruto had devoted most of his time, learning and understanding various ninjutsu, advancing his fuinjutsu skills and improving his control over Mokuton, that he did not focus much on his taijutsu. He was aware that he possessed incredibly large reserves of chakra, but he was reminded yesterday that having large amounts of chakra would not help him if he was forced into a fight where he had to rely solely on his taijutsu. He sighed once again as he remembered what his mother and Aji-chan had told him about yesterday. Even though, he was burdened with the task of keeping Konoha safe by keeping the two-tailed beasts at bay, over the years he had come to see the Kyuubi and Sanbai more than just beasts made of chakra who cared only for destruction. He would hate it, if the two bijus were forcefully taken from him. He couldn't really express it in words, but he had formed a certain bond with them. Flashback Naruto, Tsunade and Jiraiya sat in the training grounds of the Senju compound. It was located to the west of the main house of the compound where the current Senju family now resided. Tsunade had left Shizune in charge of the hospital while she had come to train Naruto. She had decided that she was not going to force him into learning a particular style of taijutsu, rather make him adapt according to his own strength. It had been a good 5 years since he started training in the arts of shinobi and she was astounded by his improvement in ninjutsu, fuinjutsu and even medical ninjutsu. It had been a tiring work to make Naruto to learn to heal himself. Even though she knew the bijus inside of him would always heal him of injuries he might receive, it was always considered beneficial for a ninja to know a little amount of medical ninjutsu in case of emergencies. Despite having trained Naruto in taijutsu and overlooking his physical exercises, since he was 5, she had never pushed him too hard. In the past 5 years, even Jiraiya had only helped Naruto in ninjutsu, helping him learn the concepts of each jutsus and how to use one depending on the situation. While none of them could use Mokuton, she was glad her grandfather had left a few notes about his Kekkei Genkai in the Senju clan library, which proved to be extremely helpful for her son. But, now that his body had gotten used to all the physical exercises and general taijutsu katas she made him go through as well as the ninjutsu and fuinjutsu he had learned over the years, she wanted to take it up a notch. She knew her son was an extremely capable shinobi even according to some jounin, but knowing the threat he would facing in the future, she had to make sure his strength would be up to par with those of his enemies. The thought of losing her son made her tremble with fear and worry. She had already lost most of the people she cared about and even though she was not Naruto's biological mother, she had come to view him as her own flesh and blood. Looking towards her favorite blonde, she was certain Naruto would become a shinobi who would become more renowned than the Shodai Hokage. She chuckled lightly knowing her only reasoning for such thoughts was, a mother's intuition. Naruto, now listen to me carefully, okay? Tsunade said seriously. Hi, Ka-chan. Replied Naruto, giving his full attention to his mother. He didn't know what his mother and Jiraiya wished to talk about, but looking at the seriousness on their faces, he gulped a little. The physical exercises along with the chakra control exercises that you have been doing over the years have made your body stronger, faster and adept at handling rough physical exercises. That is the foundation for any shinobi who wants to grow their strength. The past few years you have learnt the concepts and practical usage of various ninjutsu and your knowledge in fuinjutsu has increased dramatically. However, now I believe it's time for you to reflect on what you have learned over the years and master everything to the point that you don't feel any strain on your body or chakra when performing shinobi techniques. Tsunade explained briefly. What do you mean, Ka-chan? I already have good knowledge of everything I have learned over the years. Naruto replied with a confused face. Learning a jutsu and mastering a jutsu are two different things, Naruto. Some jutsus require more than several hand seals to be used when you learn it in the beginning, but if you can master the jutsu completely, you can perform it with either one or no hand seals at all. The Kage Bunshin no Jutsu normally requires 2 hand seals to perform the jutsu, but if you get more familiarized with the technique, it's possible to perform it with 1 or no hand seals too. Also, the better you are at performing a jutsu, the better you will become at controlling the amount of chakra used by the jutsu. Jiraiya stated in detail as he got up from the ground and dusted himself off. Tsunade nodded, agreeing with her fellow Sannin. Naruto folded his arms over his chest and closed his eyes, assimilating what he had heard. He understood what his mother and Aji-chan were trying to say in general, and he too nodded his head absently. While he had 4 natural affinities, which was a great aspect for him as a shinobi, he hadn't trained any of his affinity to his full extent. Ever since he had discovered his ability to use Mokuton naturally, he devoted most of his time to get a good grasp of his Kekkei Genkai. Hi, I understand Ka-chan, Jiraiya Aji-chan. Naruto said firmly. That's good, because from now on, your training is only going to get much harder and you won't have time to complain. Tsunade replied with a sickly smile as she cracked her knuckles. Jiraiya and Naruto both paled a little on seeing the expression on Tsunade's face. It was one which assured intense pain in every bone of the body. However, Naruto also felt a little excited upon imagining the different training exercises he will go through. It's time. We should tell him now about it now. Jiraiya muttered upon getting closer to Tsunade, who was still dreaming about the wonderful training regimen she would have Naruto follow. Huh. Oh, right. Tsunade replied. Her mood suddenly changed as she remembered that Jiraiya and her had agreed to tell Naruto about the group that would be after him. Tsunade gently called out to Naruto, who once again gave his entire attention to her. Now, listen to what Jiraiya has to say, okay? Don't interrupt him in between. It's an important matter, which you should hear directly from us. Tsunade said warmly as she placed her hand on Naruto's shoulder gently. Naruto noticed the hint of sadness in her voice but did not say anything. Turning towards the Toad Sannin, he now had a serious look on his face. This group goes by the name of Akatsuki. They are a mercenary group consisting entirely of missing ninjas from different villages, and all of them are rumored to be at least S rank or higher. Until a few years ago, they performed all sorts of missions ranging from guarding to assassinating someone. But, a while ago I received word from one of contacts that they will be hunting down the bijus that are scattered across the elemental nations. Jiraiya explained calmly. Naruto remained silent as his mind processed what Jiraiya had told now. However, as realization dawned on him as to what Jiraiya meant, he felt a cold shiver run through his spine. Collecting bijus. Wouldn't that mean they are also after the Jinchu? Naruto mumbled softly with lowered gaze. Jiraiya placed his hand on Naruto's arms to garner his attention. Upon feeling the contact, Naruto looked up at Jiraiya with a tinge of fear evident in his blue eyes. Yes, that is true, Naruto. You and the other Jinchurikis are not safe. But, you don't have to worry yet. It will be some time before they come after you. The reason you need to get stronger is, so you can defend yourself against powerful enemies. Your mother and I will protect you when the time comes, but we won't always be close to you. You are already powerful shinobi. With more years of training and experience, I'm certain you will be among the most powerful shinobi ever. Jiraiya spoke with admiration. How can you be so sure of me, Aji-chan? Naruto asked, unsure of himself. You must believe in yourself, Naruto. So long as you believe in yourself and have hope, there is nothing that can escape the grasp of your hands. Jiraiya stated wisely with a small smile. Seeing the look on his mother's and Aji-chan's face, Naruto felt an extremely strong emotion bubbling inside of himself. At this point, Tsunade noticed how the trees and flowers in the Senju compound looked so fresh, colorful, just like the time when her grandfather was alive. In fact, the entirety of Konoha was blanketed by such a calm feeling, that almost everyone could feel it unconsciously. Flashback End. Naruto. Come down for breakfast. Naruto heard his mother call from downstairs. Realizing what day today is, he smiled widely and jumped from his bed to the ground. He had been waiting for this day for a long time now. Moving closer to his windows, he opened the curtains, and the entire room was immediately bathed in the warm sunlight. Seeing the lush green field from his room and hearing the birds chirping in the morning, always made him smile and feel at peace. Getting to the bathroom, he quickly brushed his teeth and took a shower to fresh himself up. As he stepped outside the bathroom with only a towel wrapped around his waist, his widened dramatically upon seeing who was standing in his room. Hinata's cheeks began turning bright red as her eyes studied Naruto standing only with a towel wrapped around him. She could clearly see the results of Naruto's physical training over the years. Even at his young age, he had well-defined chest and abs in the making which might put some of the grown men to shame. Her innocent white eyes roamed around his upper body and muscular arms, and as her gaze lowered below slowly, her cheeks turned the brightest shade of red. Before she or Naruto could utter anything, she fainted promptly and fell on the ground with a blissful look on her face. Naruto simply stood in his place with a dumbfounded expression on his face. Though it had been only a few seconds, to him it felt like an eternity when he realized she was staring at him. Hinata-chan. Naruto yelled as his mind registered the fact that Hinata had fainted. Both Tsunade and Shizune ran upstairs on hearing Naruto's voice. Worried that something may have happened to Naruto and Hinata, both ran quickly. Soon as they reached Naruto's room, Tsunade hurriedly opened the door only to come across a situation that would remain etched in her mind for a long time. Ka-chan, Shizune-chan. She wouldn't wake up. She suddenly fainted. Is she okay? Naruto cried out with confusion written across his face. One moment he saw Hinata staring at him and the next second he knew, she fainted and fell. It's a good thing Jiraiya isn't here to see this. Tsunade said, laughing at the current predicament and how oblivious her son was as to why Hinata had fainted. She playfully slapped Shizune at the back, who too amused at the situation. Shizune, take Hinata downstairs and give her some water. Tsunade asked her student eventually. She really hoped Jiraiya did not pop out of anywhere. She was certain her perverted friend would have tried to indulge her son in the idiotic stories he wrote. Meanwhile, Naruto simply sat beside his friend with a perplexed look on his face as his mother and older sister laughed as if nothing had happened. Hi, Tsunade-sama. Shizune replied heartily, as she finally calmed down a little. She then proceeded to gently pick up the girl and walked out to the living room. Once Shizune was gone, Tsunade walked towards Naruto and knelt beside him. She's okay, Naruto. You shouldn't worry about her. Shizune will look after her, okay? Tsunade said in a motherly tone. Why did she faint suddenly, Ka-chan? Is she sick? Naruto asked yet again, uncertain about what was going on. No. She's fine. I told you not worry about it, Naru. Now, get ready and come down, okay? Tsunade stated, getting up. Naruto dumbly nodded, not really understanding what happened in the past few minutes. Just as Naruto turned around to get his clothes, he felt his mother hug him amiably from behind. Happy birthday, Naru-chan, she whispered tenderly. Her eyes moistened a little upon remembering the little baby she had held for the first time, 11 years ago. Laying down on the bed with his narrowed eyes glued to the ceiling, the ghastly images of his parents lying dead in their bedroom could not drift away from his young mind. Nor could the words that his older brother had said to him on that night. Despite all the hatred that he felt, there was a hint of sadness in those black eyes. The early morning sun rays that logged through the closed curtains of the room formed a fiery shadow upon the walls. As the minutes gradually ticked on, he breathed out calmly and finally got up from the bed in one motion. Today was the day he would take a step closer towards his destined fate. The past 2 years had been exceedingly productive for him and he was relatively satisfied with how much his strength had augmented. But, even with the strength he now possessed, it was nowhere near his older brother's or his for that matter. It irked him, how those two always walked in front of him. Frankly, he did not know what to feel about his blonde friend anymore. He was aware that to fulfill his goal, he will need to enter the darkness, but so long as he had ties with Naruto, it wouldn't be so easy. After all, Naruto was still the closest friend he had. He hated having such mixed emotions. It made him feel weak. Walking closer to the windows, he pulled the curtains apart and the awaiting sunlight immediately bathed the room in its warm glow. "It's almost time now," whispered Sasuke, looking over the area beside his house, where he had trained himself every day. Glancing towards the clock again, he quickly disappeared into the restroom, to freshen up. It wouldn't do him any good to be unnecessarily late for the graduation exam. Shortly after that and upon having some breakfast downstairs, Sasuke left the house and began his walk towards the Konoha Ninja Academy. As he walked through the empty streets of the Uchiha compound, he reminisced about his younger days. The street used to be filled with civilians and shinobi busy with their work, children running around and playing. Passing by a grocery store, he remembered the old lady who always treated him kindly. But, all of that had changed in one night. Slightly irritated that those memories were resurfacing again, he took to the rooftops and began jumping on top of them to reach his destination faster. There was no point in reminiscing about the past. It held no meaning for him. He had chosen his path years ago and there was nothing that could make him sway. 15 minutes later, Konoha Academy. The clock showed about 20 minutes until 7:30 in the morning and the classroom was already buzzing with soon-to-be genin. The day for the academy graduation exam had finally come. While most of the students who belonged to the major clans of Konoha were relatively relaxed, the others were slightly more nervous or skeptical on the prospect of becoming a shinobi. Death was an integral part of the shinobi world and one could never say when they might perish in the line of duty. To their young mind, it was a terrifying prospect, of course. Naruto was quietly sitting beside Hinata in the last row of the middle benches with his eyes closed and arms folded over his chest. Over the course of the past 2 years, the blonde had matured greatly, both in shinobi skills and intellect. Despite having his childish tendencies, he had become calmer. Ever since his godfather had introduced him to senjutsu, he felt more at peace with himself and the surrounding. It had been almost a year since he began learning the sage arts or senjutsu and over that time, he had assimilated the concept of nature chakra rather well according to his two sensei, Jiraiya and Fukasaku-sama. Even apart from senjutsu, Naruto had gone through rigorous training under his mother as well as Jiraiya in ninjutsu, taijutsu and genjutsu. And his control over Mokuton had only increased ever since he became one with nature. It had astounded even Naruto with the things he could achieve when he was in sage mode. He hadn't mastered his ability to utilize senjutsu to its full extent, but he had learned to balance the nature chakra with his own spiritual and physical energy. About 5 minutes later, when Sasuke entered the class, Naruto's blue eyes momentarily glanced at Sasuke and was met with the black ones of his friend. But soon enough, the blonde closed his eyes, again. The feeling of sheer darkness and hatred Naruto often felt from his friend, unnerved him at times. He didn't know what transpired between Sasuke and Itachi or what the younger Uchiha saw that night, but it had changed Sasuke dramatically. He didn't really show it, but he still considered Sasuke his friend. The two hadn't talked much lately, but they had an unspoken understanding between them. At least, that's what he believed. Hinata noticed the subtle interaction between the two and sighed. It had been like this for the past 2 years. Whenever she tried talking to Naruto about Sasuke, he always avoided her questions by changing the subject. However, she never pushed him hard, knowing it was a delicate matter for him. She was just glad that over the years her friendship with the blonde had only grown. Most of the class was jerked off their thoughts when they heard Sakura's and several other girls' childish scream when their eyes landed on the raven-haired Uchiha. But as usual, no one ever said a word. It was rather bothersome for majority of them to listen to Sakura's rant when one said something against her beloved Sasuke. Soon as the clock showed 7:30, Iruka, Yumino and Mizuki promptly entered the classroom with stacks of paper in their hand. Upon keeping those papers on the table, Iruka turned towards the class with a smile on his face while Mizuki stood behind the table. Iruka looked over his class again, a little sad that today would be the last time that he'll be seeing them all together. It was his batch of students and he couldn't have asked for a better one. Iruka was certain everyone was going to pass the exam despite having trouble teaching some of them. He was surprised to see even Shikamaru awake. Perhaps there was hope for the lazy one too. Nonetheless, he was extremely proud of the way everyone had grown in the past 4 years. I hope everyone is prepared for the graduation exam? Iruka asked. Upon seeing everyone nod, he too moved next to the teacher's table. He then proceeded to call everyone's name from his book, to make sure that all the students were in fact present. Once he was done, he looked up at the class again. Now, Mizuki-sensei will be distributing the question papers and each one of you has exactly an hour to finish the exam. After that, we'll proceed with the weapons exam, taijutsu exam and ninjutsu exam. Once everything is over, the results will be announced in the class. Those who'll pass will become a genin of Konohagakure no Sato. Iruka announced loudly, for everyone to hear his words properly. He waited a few seconds and seeing how there were no questions directed to him, he nodded to Mizuki who began distributing the question papers accordingly. Shortly, as he passed by Naruto's seat, he gave a hateful glare to the blonde which wasn't missed by the young Senju. Shrugging off his sensei's actions, Naruto simply took the paper from him and began going through the questions. It was no secret to anyone in the academy that Mizuki hated Naruto for being the Jinchuriki of the two Bijou who killed his brother 12 years ago. However, he knew he couldn't afford to take any action against the boy as of now. With 2 of the Sannin within the village, it was certainly a risky maneuver. After about 10 minutes or so, all the students had begun writing while Iruka and Mizuki kept an eye on everyone. It was of no surprise to the scar-faced Chunin when he noticed Naruto, Sasuke, Hinata and Shikamaru had already the test halfway through the allowed time. Iruka eyed the Nara heir a little suspiciously, always having the feeling that Shikamaru was much smarter than he showed himself to be. He sighed wondering if Shikamaru would ever grow out of his laziness. Soon enough, the 1 hour allotted for the written had come to an end and Iruka looked at all the students firmly and said, "You may all now stop writing. The time is up. Remain seated in your desks while Mizuki-sensei will collect the papers. Your answers will then be evaluated by other academy teachers while you all will be partaking in next parts of the graduation exam." Once the papers were collected by Mizuki, the students along with Iruka began moving to the training grounds of the academy for the weapons and taijutsu exam. Training ground behind the academy. Everyone, here are 10 kunai and shuriken each on the table, that you must throw at the target and hit the mark. Each kunai or shuriken aimed correctly at the mark will earn you 1 point. Iruka explained briefly and began calling out the student's name from his list. Most of the students had managed to score at least 14 points out of the 20 while a few had scored between 8 and 12. Setting his eyes on the last 2 students, Iruka smiled widely. Out of all his students, Naruto and Sasuke were the most advanced in the shinobi arts. Even some of the other teachers at the academy were slightly envious that the heir of the Senju and Uchiha clan were in Iruka's class. "Sasuke Uchiha!" Iruka called out. Suddenly a lot of the girls started to yell encouraging words for Sasuke while some among them even proclaimed their love for the young raven-haired boy. Sasuke simply ignored the shouts and moved towards the table to pick up the kunais and shurikens. Then moving on to the spot from he had to throw from, Sasuke exhaled and let his body relax. Glancing at the target for a second, he flicked his wrist and released the 10 kunais simultaneously, which ended up hitting the mark. He then proceeded to do the same with the shurikens, which yielded him the same result. Good job as usual, Sasuke. Iruka congratulated, and he noticed that Sasuke had already walked to the back of the group. It had pained him a little to see how drastically Sasuke had changed ever since the demise of the Uchiha clan. But, he also knew there was only person in the class Sasuke listened to, even if remotely, as his eyes then fell on Naruto. "Naruto, you're up now," Iruka called out. Wanting to get done with this part of the exams quickly, Naruto picked up the kunais from the table and skillfully threw them towards marks specified on the target. And with the shurikens too, Naruto managed to hit each of the mark on the target with accurate precision. Looking towards his sensei once, Naruto walked back to the group and was instantly congratulated by Kiba, Shino, Hinata and Shikamaru. Sasuke did not even glance at the blonde Senju and quietly stood at the back. As Iruka noted down all the scores once again, he walked to the center of the field and asked everyone to gather before him for the taijutsu part of the exam. "Now, I will be calling out 2 students' name each turn. You are to combat the other using only taijutsu. Unlike the taijutsu sessions you have had in the past, in today's test your goal is to either knock out your opponent or make them yield. However, there is a time limit of 10 minutes for each spar. Now remember that it does not matter if you lose the match. You will be scored on how well your taijutsu has improved since the beginning of the academy," Iruka stated clearly. We are definitely going to mop the floor with anyone we're matched with," Kiba declared dauntingly, puffing his chest slightly. His Ninken, Akamaru, barked in an approving manner, further uplifting Kiba's confidence. "Shut up, Kiba. Don't try to act cool in front of everyone," Sakura yelled indignantly, thinking that the young Inuzuka was trying to put Sasuke down. Her claim was supported by more girls who had similar feelings about the uncaring Uchiha. Kiba looked at the pink-haired girl accusingly for a few seconds but backed down when he felt someone's hand on his shoulder. Looking back, he was mildly surprised to see it was Shino who had stopped him. It would be illogical to get into petty fights during the graduation exams. "You must keep your calm," Shino stated in his usual monotone voice. Although a tad bit irritated that he couldn't give a piece of his mind to Sakura, he knew his friend was right. Upon noticing that most of the class was now staring at him, he rubbed the back of his head sheepishly. "Oops," whispered Kiba, rather awkwardly. Naruto chuckled on witnessing the whole event. He just wished if the shinobi life would be as easygoing as it was now, but again, it was just wishful thinking. A small frown appeared on Iruka's face on noticing that most had yet again begun talking among themselves. "Everyone quiet down. It's not the time to be discussing such irrelevant matters. You all are soon going to be genin. You shouldn't take the ninja life so lightly. I'm not going to sugarcoat things for you. The life of a shinobi is an extremely hard one, where you constantly must make decisions and take actions for the welfare of the village. We shinobi are the ones who must do the hard tasks, so the innocents may live peacefully. You may not understand the meaning behind those words yet, but someday you will. I just hope you are mentally well prepared to bear the burden," Iruka stated loudly, using chakra to amplify his voice. All the students were slightly taken aback by their sensei's sudden change in demeanor, but none said another word. However, Iruka knew out of all the students Naruto, Sasuke and Shikamaru were probably the only ones who understood the implied meaning of his words. A couple of minutes later, the scar-faced Chunin started calling out the student's name to come forward and proceeded to begin the third part of the graduation exam. The first few spars were between the civilian students and it proved to be quite an eyesore. Frankly, the taijutsu displayed was standard enough for academy students, but it was the lack of proper basics katas that made the spars seem less than mediocre. It was a common belief among the civilian families that if their kids managed to become shinobi their lifestyle would enhance. But they completely disregard the dangers that entail with becoming a shinobi. Yet, Irika had hoped that they too would nurture into fine and loyal shinobi of the leaf. It was after all, a teacher's task to believe in their student, no matter the situation. While it could be said that some of the students performed on an average level merely because of their civilian backgrounds, it wasn't necessarily the truth. The match between Sakura and Ino was a comical sight for everyone. Rather than a taijutsu spar between prospective genin, it looked more like two girls fighting over their romantic interests and finally falling on the ground due to exhaustion. Even Irika for that matter was speechless. He would certainly need to have a talk with the Hokage regarding a few of the students in his class. It wouldn't bode well for the village or a shinobi if they did not have even the adequate skills to step into the field. As the time proceeded, all the students were done with their evaluation and the only ones left were Naruto and Sasuke. Upon being called to fight, both stepped forward and began walking to the center of the field. "Good luck, Naruto-kun," Hinata said softly. Naruto stopped momentarily to look back and gave her a wide smile, which made the Hyuga heiress slightly blush. Even after all these years, she still couldn't help but blush at his vibrant smile. It was as warm and bright as the sun. "Thanks, Hinata-chan. But, don't worry about me. I will be fine." Naruto reassured his friend, giving her a thumbs up and then walked towards Irika. He knew she had a habit of getting overly worried at times, but these were the small things that he really liked about her. Sakura, who had watched the brief conversation between Naruto and Hinata, felt a little envious of the relationship between those two. Glancing at Sasuke's back, she wondered if she'd ever have that with Sasuke. Lowering her head, she remained quiet as she saw Naruto and Sasuke stand opposite to each other. Despite her dislike of Naruto, she did not outright hate him. Yes, she had called him a horrible thing a few years ago in the past, but that was only because she did not know any better. Normally, a child would believe any word that came from their parents. But she did hold a bit of grudge against Naruto for the severe interrogation her parents and she had to go through during that time. She had never been more scared than that day. Although, her behavior soon reverted to a love-struck girl, who began yelling words of encouragement for Sasuke. A few of the students even had to cover their ears because of how loud she was. "Naruto, Sasuke, are you both ready?" Irika asked expectantly. Upon seeing both nod their heads, he called a start to the match and jumped back. An eerie silence reigned over the training ground as everyone had their focus on them and the excitement was clearly visible in their eyes. As a little more than 10 seconds passed, Naruto took his time to sense his opponent. He smirked slightly on realizing how much stronger Sasuke had become, all by himself. He doubted if he could do it all alone. Given the somewhat strained relationship between the two, Sasuke and Naruto rarely ever met each other outside of the academy. "Well, show me, Sasuke. Show me how much stronger you have become," Naruto stated with a small smile. It had been quite some time since he fought with his friend. Out of all his academy friends, fighting with Sasuke always made him feel more alive and it was only with him that he could fight giving his all. He wasn't arrogant, just confident in his power. And he was sure, to some extent Sasuke felt the same. "I don't have anything to prove to you, Naruto," Sasuke replied, his face portraying a calm look. As his fully matured Sharingan came into view, he arched forward and rushed towards Naruto at high speed. Upon briefly seeing the Sharingan, Naruto too ran towards Sasuke, matching his speed equally. Soon enough, the two clashed with their posterior forearms pushing against each other. A sudden gust of wind blew around the two as they exerted more force, trying to overpower the other. Slight cracks began to develop on the ground below them, as a testament to their power. But, after a few seconds Sasuke loosened his arm and allowed himself to fall backwards, catching the blonde off guard. Taking advantage of Naruto's momentary lack of focus, he immediately ducked, and went for a punch to the stomach. Quickly regaining himself, Naruto swatted away his arm and kneed him just below the ribcage. However, soon as Naruto seemed to make a contact with Sasuke, there was a puff of smoke, revealing Naruto's knee breaking a log of wood into several pieces. Glancing up, Naruto saw the Uchiha descending towards him, a kunai in his hand. Taking out his own kunai, the two once again clashed against each other for supremacy, and the sound of two kunais striking against each other reverberated through the entire field. This time, instead of applying more force, Sasuke propelled himself off Naruto and backflipped. Soon as he landed on the ground, he took out 4 more kunais and threw all of them towards Naruto. As Naruto began to deflect all the kunais thrown at him, he saw Sasuke rapidly approach him from the corner of his left eye and realized that the kunais were just a distraction. He's incredibly fast, Naruto thought. Waiting for Sasuke to come closer, Naruto swiftly ducked and went for a leg sweep, which the Uchiha avoided by jumping above him. Soon as Naruto got up, he turned around to block a punch from Sasuke, who was now standing alarmingly close to him. Retreating his arm, Naruto covered his left fist in chakra and aimed it towards Sasuke's celiac plexus. Already having anticipated the attack with his Sharingan, Sasuke proceeded to duck down. But he soon realized his mistake when he noticed the small smirk on Naruto's face. Not having enough time to dodge the next strike, Sasuke was hit roughly on his right shoulder. The strength behind that kick easily made him lose his footing and he was thrown several feet back. Naruto smirked, having finally landed a proper hit on Sasuke. However, his smile soon faded when he noticed a relatively unhurt Sasuke walk towards him. The two then proceeded to engage in a relentless taijutsu battle. None of them could gain an advantage over the other or land a decisive hit. Each strike was narrowly avoided by both, which showcased their impressive reflexes. To any bystanding shinobi, it would appear as if it was fight between seasoned shinobi. It had been a little over 5 minutes now, and everyone who was watching the two of them spar had their eyes wide with anticipation. Several of the other academy teachers too had stepped outside their classroom to watch the fight from the first floor. Watching young shinobi with such raw power made them shudder a little upon wondering how strong the two would turn out to be in their prime age. Wow! Look at those two go at each other, Ino stated, amazed. She never understood how those two were so much stronger than everyone else. It honestly baffled her at times. Unknown to her, similar thoughts were going through the mind of several other students who simply kept their eyes on the fight. Makes me kind of glad that I wasn't up against any of them, Kiba said with a sigh of relief. It wasn't that he was terrible. Like any clan heir, he too was trained from a young age in his own clan's taijutsu style, but the two in front of him were years ahead of him in skills. There were times he seethed with anger on always being bested by the two. But every time he saw them fight, he realized that neither Sasuke nor Naruto used their entire strength when fighting someone other than each other. He was just glad that Naruto did not act like the way Sasuke did. He frankly could not stand the sight of that arrogant Uchiha. I need to finish this quickly. We aren't getting anywhere with taijutsu. And I'm not allowed to use ninjutsu. That leaves me with only one option, Naruto thought calculatedly. Swatting away a right hook, Naruto swiftly jumped over Sasuke and faster than any normal eye could see, he flipped back to kick the Uchiha right on his cheekbone. Blocking the punch with his arm, Sasuke caught Naruto's foot with his other hand and threw him onto the ground with a resounding thud. He wasn't disappointed when he noticed there was a log of wood in Naruto's place. Looking in front of him, he noticed Naruto slowly walking towards him with a single-handed ram seal. However, before he could make a move, black kanji erupted from his right arm and spread all over his body in a span of couple of seconds. His Sharingan quickly spotted the seal that was placed on his arm as he sent a glare towards the blonde. He had never taken much interest in Fuinjutsu, but he did have a wee bit of knowledge in the art. He tried breaking the seal by unleashing more of his chakra, but his body simply became stiffer and he fell on the ground. Despite not knowing the reason behind Sasuke's current predicament, it was an amusing sight for Kiba, Shikamaru, Choji and Hinata. Ino, Sakura and several other girls shouted profanities at the young Senju for trapping their beloved Sasuke. "What did you do to me?" Sasuke asked accusingly. Not being able to move any part of his body was certainly an unwelcoming sight for him. And from what he now understood, it was unwise for him to use his chakra too. "I put a paralysis seal on you during our taijutsu spar. It's a little different than a normal one. The more chakra you use, the stiffer your body becomes, as you can already feel." Naruto replied with a smirk. But, he knew, if it was an actual fight with his friend, it would have been much more drawn out and close. Iruka and the other academy teachers were wide-eyed at the scene before them. Never had they seen an academy student use Fuinjutsu so flawlessly. "I suppose the spar has ended with that last maneuver," Iruka called out as he appeared between the two in a shunshin. Naruto then proceeded to remove the seal from Sasuke once Iruka had noted down the scores for Naruto and Sasuke in his list. "I was sure I could beat you in a one-on-one taijutsu battle. But, you were much stronger than I anticipated. That was a great fight, Sasuke," Naruto said with a cheery attitude as Sasuke got up from the ground. Dusting himself off a little, he turned his attention to Naruto. "We both know we didn't fight each other seriously. But when we do, the results will be much different," Sasuke whispered, so that only Naruto could hear him. With that said, he turned around and walked to the back of the group without saying another word to anyone else. There was no anger or resentment in his voice. To Naruto, it sounded more like a plain fact. He smiled, silently accepting the challenge. Then, he too walked back to stand beside Hinata. Iruka then asked the students to go back to the class and wait for their names to be called for the ninjutsu part of the graduation exam. Once all the students were seated in the classroom, Mizuki called out each one's name alphabetically and the student was then taken to another room for the final test. It was the Sandaime Hokage, Iruka and the academy principal who were to judge the ninjutsu skill of the students. Hiruzen had made it customary for himself to be present during the graduation exam of every student. As a Hokage, it wouldn't do him well if he didn't see what these young kids could do, himself. In the ninjutsu part of the exam, a student had to show mastery over the three basic jutsus, Bunshin no Jutsu, Kawarimi no Jutsu and Henge no Jutsu. Due to the peaceful times that were ensued since the end of the Third Shinobi War, the requirements for graduation had only decreased. It wasn't until 2 hours later that all the students had completed the exams and Iruka was mildly taken aback by the fact that all his students had passed. But, more than that, he was extremely delighted to see all of them become genin and become an official ninja of the leaf. "Well, how do you think the teams are going to grouped?" Choji asked randomly, opening another pack of barbecue-flavored chips. It was his favorite flavor after all. Sakura and Ino, who also heard Choji's words, gave him a quizzical look. Before anyone else could reply, Sakura stood up and proudly claimed, "Of course I'm going to be teamed up with Sasuke-kun." On hearing that, several girls began arguing among themselves that they wanted to be paired with the Uchiha. Naruto was even surprised to hear some of the girls wanting to be in the same team with him. He briefly wondered what his mother or Jiraiya Aji-chan would do when they learned about the number of girls who were after him. No, they can never find out about this," Naruto thought dreadfully. His godfather would certainly have that perverted smile on his face while his mother would lecture him about keeping his innocence. For some reason, he found it odd that his mother never really said anything about Hinata spending so much time with him. Coming out of his thoughts, he couldn't help but laugh lightly at the devotion he saw in Sakura's eyes for Sasuke at times. Despite not having a very friendly relationship with the pink-haired girl, he knew she didn't have any deep-rooted hatred for him. Although, he had to sympathize with Sasuke too. Fangirls were quite annoying and stupid at times, not that he would ever mention it out loud. "I suppose they would team us up based on our abilities in taijutsu, ninjutsu, genjutsu and our physical prowess. I was told by my father that teams are often divided into attack, defense and tracking units. Shino stated calmly. Like most members of the Aburame clan, he only spoke what was necessary. Not a word more, or less. I just hope I'm teamed with an overall good team. I could not do much in the taijutsu exam, but the written and ninjutsu part went fairly well for me. Kiba also said with his head hung a little low. He had hoped to show everyone how much he had improved, but having faced off against Hinata did not do him much good. It was a known fact that among the clans who specialized in taijutsu that a hand-to-hand combat with a member from Hyuga clan is never a wise choice. Naruto, who was sitting beside the Ninken user, placed a comforting hand on Kiba's shoulder. You're worrying too much. My Ka-san says our progress throughout our time in the academy is taken under consideration for making the team. While it is important to pass the graduation exam, that alone is not crucial. Naruto replied with a warm smile. Kiba calmed a little having heard that from Naruto. Akamaru too barked, as if agreeing with the young blonde Senju. Well, whatever the case, I think we should all go out for dinner somewhere tonight. All these exams have made me hungrier. Choji exclaimed, throwing away the empty packet of chips. Kiba, Ino and Sakura readily agreed to that, and Choji had already begun dreaming of the delicious meat he would get to eat in the evening. What do you say, Hinata-chan? Do you think your father will allow? Naruto asked with a hopeful look on his face. I think so. I will ask Ka-sama. Will talk to father. Hinata replied, a bit hesitantly. Ever since the kidnapping attempt on her earlier, her father never let her go outside without 2 or 3 guards around her. And it would be awkward for her guards were to join her friends for dinner. Naruto understood what she meant by that and became quiet soon after. He looked around the class and saw that everyone was happily chatting with someone or other. They're here. Naruto whispered, low enough for only Hinata to hear. And shortly, the door to the classroom opened and in walked Iruka, followed by 6 more shinobis, who Naruto believed were their Jounin sensei. Immediately everyone in the room became quiet as their eyes landed on the new faces in front of them. Once again, I'd like to congratulate everyone on graduating from the academy. You lot were my first batch of students and I'm glad to have taught you well. I hope each one you will go on to make our village proud. Now, as you all know, all of you will be divided into team of 3 members with each team having a Jounin sensei to help you grow further. Now, I will be announcing the team members and their Jounin sensei in order. Iruka explained and began calling out the team name, the members in it and their Jounin sensei. Seeing as how it would take at least 10 to 15 minutes, Naruto adjusted himself in his seat comfortably and closed his eyes. As a few more minutes passed, Hinata became a little restless as she saw how some people were dissatisfied with the team arrangement. Deep in her heart, she knew that she wanted to be in the same team as Naruto. Despite having become really close to him, she could never bring up enough courage to confess her feelings to him. She giggled upon realizing even if she did tell him, he wouldn't comprehend her clearly. Growing up with him, she found it funny how Naruto could be so intellectual in the shinobi arts, but when it came to love, he could be utterly confused. Naruto-kun. Do you think we'll be in the same team? I mean, you're close to the Sandaime, right? Hinata asked quietly, making Naruto open his eyes curiously. Huh. I didn't expect you to be worried about something like that, Hinata-chan. Well, it would certainly be great if we are. Naruto started, oblivious to her feelings, but was soon cut off when he heard his name being called. Naruto Senju, Sakura Haruno and Sasuke Uchiha will make Team 7. Your Jounin sensei will be Kakashi Hitaki. Iruka called out. Looking to his left, he sighed, realizing that Kakashi was once again late. Over 2 hours had passed since the teams were announced and the newly formed Team 7 was still waiting for their sensei to arrive. Naruto, Sasuke and Sakura were all seated on the same bench on the far left side of the class, near the windows. While Sasuke quietly sat with a relatively calm look on his face, even he was beginning to get a little irritated with the tardiness of their appointed Jounin sensei. However, it was Sakura's constant attempt to talk to him that was thinning his patience further. He glanced to his right to see that Naruto still had his eyes closed and had not uttered a single word since the room became empty. HN. Only a loser like him can fall asleep at a time like this, thought Sasuke inwardly, a little amused by Naruto's antics. It was always just like him to have a light mind. Yet, Sasuke knew better. When is he going to come, whined Sakura, for the umpteenth time. We have been waiting here for hours. Every other team's sensei came and took off with their teams. Is our sensei even a Jounin for real? Sasuke was about to tell the girl to shut up, when Naruto voiced his thoughts. Our sensei is one of the strongest Jounins of Konohagakure, Sakura. He's known throughout the shinobi world as the man who copied over 1,000 jutsus and goes by the moniker of Sharingan no Kakashi. Both Sakura and Sasuke were shocked on hearing that title, more so Sasuke. He had his eyes slightly wide in disbelief on learning that their sensei had the Sharingan. What do you mean, Naruto? Our sensei is an Uchiha? But, I thought everyone other than Sasuke-kun was. Sakura said but stopped midway. No, he's not an Uchiha. From what I know, he got the Sharingan from one of his teammates at the end of the Third Shinobi War. He has one Sharingan, which he keeps hidden under his forehead protector. Naruto clarified. Sasuke grew more interested on hearing that news. He became a little excited on the prospect of testing his own eyes against Kakashi's. He was also curious about how well a non-Uchiha could utilize the full extent of the Sharingan's abilities. How do you know all of this, Naruto? We haven't even met our sensei till now. Even if he's as strong as you say, don't you think he should be more punctual? Sakura questioned in confusion. Opening his eyes, Naruto turned towards the pink-haired girl and momentarily stared at her and shook his head. He assumed Sakura would have figured it out by now, given how smart she tends to be at times. Jiraiya-sensei told me. Kakashi Hatake was a student of the Yondaime Hokage, who was taught by Jiraiya Aji-chan. Told Naruto casually. The other two were further surprised on hearing that. Sakura was in shock on learning that she would be taught by someone so accomplished. However, most of her mind was still hung up on the fact about how much time she would get to spend with her Sasuke. Wow, that sounds so cool, exclaimed Sakura. It was at this point that the doors to the classroom opened and in walked a tall shinobi with spiky silver hair oriented to his left side and a face mask which covered a good portion of his face. However, it was the typically relaxed and heavy-lidded expression on his face that caught the attention of Sakura and Sasuke. Having met the shinobi earlier on many occasions, Naruto was used to the bored expression planted on Kakashi's face. Even so, it still amused him greatly that the man could appear to be so bored. It suddenly made him wonder that Kakashi could give Shikamaru a run for his money when it came to being bored. What took you so long to come, sensei? Sakura yelled immediately, forgetting all sense of awe she was feeling a moment ago. Ah, you see, I met an old lady on the way here and lost track of time while helping her with groceries. Kakashi replied nonchalantly. Sakura became quiet on hearing the reason and nodded in approval of her sensei's actions. Hika-chan always told her to be respectful towards the elders. Naruto had to control himself from outright laughing as he could sense Kakashi's bluff while Sasuke merely shook his head at the girl's stupidity. Anyway, I think we should reconvene at the roof and start off with team introduction from there on. Kakashi stated and disappeared in a cloud of smoke. Sakura was surprised to see that their sensei simply disappeared like that, but she was further surprised when even Sasuke simply faded out of view. Wow, Sasuke-kun is so cool, she thought to herself. The next second, Naruto and Sakura got up from the bench and took the more traditional route and made their way to the roof via the stairs. Even though Naruto could use the Shunshin no Jutsu, he did not feel the need to use it at this moment. Unlike Sasuke, he considered himself to be more patient. It was ironic considering how Sasuke considered himself to be the more patient one. A few minutes later, once Naruto and Sakura had reached the roof, Kakashi was leaning on the railings whilst reading a small book and Sasuke sat on the stairs with his elbows on his knee. Sakura promptly rushed and took her place to Sasuke's left and Naruto sat a further away to his right. Alright, since everyone is here, let us start with the team introduction. I want each one of you to introduce yourself. Kakashi said, not taking his eyes off the book he was reading. Sensei, what should we say? Sakura asked, a little shyly. Well, why not I start off first and then one of you can follow my lead? Kakashi said with an eye. Smile and shut his book to look at his students. My name is Kakashi Hitaki. I have a lot of hobbies and do have a dream sort of. And I am a jounin of Konoha. All three of the genin gained stupid looks on their face on hearing that introduction. He didn't really say anything about himself, thought both Naruto and Sakura. Why don't you start, Naruto? Kakashi asked. My name is Naruto Senju and my dream is to surpass all the previous Hokage of Konohagakure no Sato. I like to train in the shinobi arts and my favorite part is ninjutsu. I also love studying fuinjutsu and my favorite hobby is gardening, and I love eating ramen, exclaimed Naruto with enthusiasm. Kakashi then pointed toward Sakura, whose face began to blush slightly. My name is Sakura Haruno. She glanced towards Sasuke. Who I like is, she squealed a little as she turned away from the Uchiha. My dream is to. Yet again she glanced at Sasuke and squealed with a blush creeping up her face. I suppose it's your turn now, Sasuke. Kakashi said with a sigh, not noticed by others. I'm Sasuke Uchiha. What I have is not a dream, but an ambition and something which I'll make sure will become a reality in the future. I want to kill a certain man and restore the power the Uchiha clan once held in the village. Stated Sasuke with a serious face. Both Kakashi and Naruto narrowed their eyes slightly on hearing that. Sasuke and he rarely spoke to each these past few years and despite knowing how he felt about his brother, he could never really comprehend Sasuke's pain completely since he never lost anyone close to him. While he too had felt extremely saddened by the Uchiha clan's unfortunate demise, he believed Itachi had a reason for his actions. But, over the years he had felt Sasuke's chakra had grown darker and it often gave him a shrill. Sakura simply stared at Sasuke with stars in her eyes. The fact that Sasuke was so mysterious and his different personality than the other boys always appealed to her. He was a mystery that she wanted to solve with all her heart. His hatred towards Itachi has only grown, as the reports say. I will have to keep a special eye on him to make sure he doesn't do anything to put himself on a wrong path. Kakashi thought with caution. Well, that's all good to hear. Now that we are done with the introduction, let's get to the good part, shall we? Kakashi said as he kept his book in his back pouch. Are we going to go on a mission, sensei? Sakura asked cheerfully. She really couldn't wait to go on missions with her team and show Sasuke how good her shinobi skills were. Missions? Nah. You guys need to pass a test first to be approved as a team ready for missions. Kakashi revealed. This time all the three genins gained surprised looks on their faces. What test, sensei? Didn't we already pass the graduation test and become genin? Asked Naruto perplexedly. Sasuke and Sakura too had similar thoughts running through their mind. Well, that is true. But, that test is just to see if you guys have the necessary knowledge and basic skills to become a shinobi. Every team will have this test which I am going to conduct. It's to see if you guys can function as shinobi in the real world. The Shinobi Academy doesn't give a student much exposure to the world outside of the village. That is the Jounin Sensei's task to check. Kakashi explained. What happens if we fail the test, sensei? Sakura asked, a little fearful. While she was good with books and genjutsu, she got average marks in taijutsu and shurikenjutsu back in the academy. Well, if a team fails the test, they will be sent back to the academy. This test conducted by the Jounin sensei is mainly to weed out the weak students. Only 9 students can pass this test in general. Kakashi stated. He was surprised by the lack of reaction from Naruto and Sasuke. He assumed they either knew the general idea behind the test or were confident in their own abilities. Not like individual abilities is going to help them in this test anyway, thought the masked ninja. Sakura became a little tensed on hearing her sensei's words. She really wished to be a shinobi, mainly because she wanted to spend more time with Sasuke and show her love how good she was. But on hearing the seriousness behind Kakashi's words, it troubled her mind if she was in fact up to the challenge. Don't worry, Sakura. It's going to be fine, she heard Naruto's words. Looking at his kind smile, she eased up a little but still worried about her abilities as a ninja. Let's meet at Training Ground 7 in 15 minutes and we'll see if you guys can work as a team. I will explain the details of the test over there. Kakashi said and once again disappeared in a cloud of smoke. Once Kakashi had gone, Sasuke simply got up from his spot and used Shunshin to make his way towards the training ground. He had absolute faith in his abilities as a ninja. He had chosen his path in life and there would be nothing that could stop him from getting his revenge. Becoming a shinobi for Konoha was merely a stepping stone for him. Naruto sighed as he sensed Sasuke's turbulent feelings. He couldn't blame him, but even after all this, while he wished Sasuke opened to him more regarding his feelings, he still viewed the Uchiha as his brother. Well, let's go, Sakura. We wouldn't want to be late for the test, yeah? Naruto asked rhetorically. Sakura was a bit slumped too on seeing Sasuke's behavior. She always tried her hardest to make herself look good in front of Sasuke, but he never took notice of her and that really hurt her. She thought once she became a shinobi, maybe then he'd notice her, but now even that was looking like a slim reality. Don't give up hope so easily, Sakura. He's a hard person to understand. Just give him some time. Naruto said to her with a vibrant smile as they made their way out of the academy. Sakura merely nodded but kept quiet rest of the way to the training ground. She did not really know what to say to the blonde. Given how she had once treated him, she was still a little embarrassed about it. Yet, she did not really understand that whole ordeal. She had only reacted how her parents had asked her to. But over the years as she had seen him, he was nothing like how her parents had described him to be. It's true at one point she had outright detested Naruto for how her parents treated by those mask-wearing shinobi years ago. But her parents had explained to her that it was primarily their fault. She was just glad that Naruto never lashed out at her for being mean. Maybe, things would improve once she got to know him a little better. Training Ground 7. After 9 or 10 minutes of walk, Naruto and Sakura had finally reached Training Ground 7. Like the other training grounds in the village, this one had a vast clearing that was surrounded by trees on 3 of the sides, while there was a small pond on the northwest corner of the ground. Ah, you guys made it here finally. Kakashi greeted as he walked towards them. Naruto looked around for Sasuke and found him leisurely sitting under the shade of the tree. Looking up, he realized it was quite sunny today. Soon enough, Sasuke also joined them and the 3 genins were now quietly standing before Kakashi, waiting for further instruction. Okay, your test is to. Kakashi started as he took out 2 bells from his pouch. Take these bells from me. Whoever gets a bell, passes the test and can become a genin, thereby allowed to go on missions for the village. He stated calmly. As expected, it was Sakura who voiced her concerns regarding the test before anyone else. But sensei, there are only 2 bells. How can all 3 of us pass if only 2 of us can get a bell each? Sakura stated in confusion. She was beginning to get a bad feeling about this test for some reason. While Sasuke had no qualms with the rules, Naruto momentarily thought about the overall aspect of this test. If only two of them were supposed to pass, that would make Team 7 a three-man squad. And he had never heard of a newly graduated team which only had two genins and one jounin sensei. He cursed Jiraiya for talking to him in riddles when he had asked the Sannin regarding the graduation exam and what comes after it. A shinobi is one who carves out his own path by analyzing the situation thoroughly and with the help of others around him. That was what Jiraiya had quoted to him a few weeks prior to the graduation exam. It irked him to not know what exactly his perverted sensei was talking about at that point. He turned to Sasuke to ask him something but was surprised with the slight smirk the Uchiha had on his face. "Well, you catch on quick, Sakura. You see, the village doesn't want weak shinobi to represent itself against other villages. When out in the field, you'll have to think analytically in every belief you have will be tested in numerous ways. You must be prepared mentally as well as physically to be working as a shinobi for Konoha. Although, there has been relative peace among the great five nations, you can never be too certain as to when the next war may break. In the shinobi world, the line between peace and war is an extremely fickle one. So, this test is mainly to weed out those who aren't capable to handle the pressure out in the field." The three were surprised to hear the hardness in Kakashi's voice. They realized the person before them wasn't speaking as a jounin sensei but as an experienced shinobi of the village. The very next second, his face relaxed a lot more as he said, "Now, go on. It's almost 10 right now. And you have until noon to get the bells from me. Also, a word of warning. If you really want to get the bells, come at me with the intention to kill." Naruto and Sasuke promptly scattered and went towards the tree to come up with an effective plan to acquire the bells. Sakura remained rooted to her place as her sensei's words had hit her quite harshly. She was about to follow Sasuke to ask him for help, but she couldn't will herself to do it for some reason. She saw Kakashi eyeing her expectantly and then she too ran towards the trees. They don't seem to have figured it out already. It'll be sad if I'll have to fail a team with such untapped potential. Kakashi thought as he waited in his place for the genins to apprehend him. To Kakashi's east, Sasuke stood on the branch of a relatively tall tree from where he had a good view of Kakashi. From the moment he had heard about their sensei having a Sharingan, he was itching to test his strength against him. Back when he used to train with Itachi, he was aware Itachi had never used his full strength against him. But, things were different now. He had grown much stronger than those days. Ever since that night, he trained every day until exhaustion with only one goal in his mind. He would kill Itachi no matter what. Activating his Sharingan, he took out 3 kunais and expertly threw them towards the unsuspecting jounin, all of them aimed for a vital spot. However, he was surprised when Kakashi just sidestepped all 3 of them without even a glance. Jumping towards the jounin, he took out shurikens this time and hurled towards Kakashi from a much closer distance. Yet again, Kakashi simply deflected all the shurikens with his own kunai swiftly. As Sasuke now stood before the jounin, he seethed a little as their sensei was yet to take his eyes off his book. "Pay attention to the fight, damn it," Sasuke stated. His words however, seemed to fall on deaf ears as he got no reply. "You say something?" Kakashi replied casually as he continued reading his book. Deciding to make him take things seriously, Sasuke rushed towards the jounin with an impressive speed. Kakashi however, was completely aware of his surroundings. Initially, he was surprised to notice the fully matured Sharingan in Sasuke and was impressed with his shurikenjutsu too. As Sasuke closed the distance between them, he went for a punch to his sensei's left arm which Kakashi swatted away. But, he cringed ever so slightly as he felt the strength behind that hit. He was given no time to think as he had to jump back immediately as Sasuke came at him with a kick to his knee. However, having predicted Kakashi's next moves, Sasuke swiftly caught Kakashi by his left ankle and pulled him down with all his strength. Surprised by the move, Kakashi hit the ground with a thud. Sasuke immediately jumped back and smirked, but it soon faded away when he noticed a log of wood instead of Kakashi. Phew, that was close. So, he seems to be well experienced in using the Sharingan. I suppose I'll have to take him a little seriously. I wonder what the other two are doing. Kakashi thought, amused. Well, Sasuke. You have gotten my attention. Your speed, movements, and your ability with the Sharingan is certainly impressive, I must say. Kakashi stated out loud as he came out of the woods. You'll have to take this seriously. I'm not your average genin. Sasuke replied smugly. Kakashi certainly agreed to that and kept his book back in his pouch. He then rushed towards Sasuke with high speed. Sasuke was momentarily shocked by speed but kept his calm. He could still follow Kakashi's movements with his Sharingan. As soon as Kakashi came close to him, the two engaged in a heated taijutsu battle. While Kakashi wasn't putting all his efforts into battling, he was pleasantly surprised that Sasuke was able to match him in speed and strength to some extent. However, after a few minutes of exchanging blows he could see that the Uchiha was beginning to tire out. As Kakashi aimed a punch to Sasuke's abdomen, Sasuke quickly did a backflip, avoiding the punch by just a graze. Katan, Bukakyu no Jutsu, Sasuke called out after performing the required hand seals and spewed a large ball of fire from his mouth which then proceeded towards Kakashi at an alarming speed. Not one to do outdone by a mere genin, Kakashi stood his ground and performed his own hand seals to counter the Katan Jutsu. Suetun, Mizurappa, Kakashi said and shot a strong jet of water from his mouth which clashed against the ball of fire. The two jutsus fought for dominance for a few seconds but ended up cancelling each other out. The clearing was now covered in thick mist because of the two jutsu colliding. Using the mist as a cover, Sasuke immediately performed the Shunshin no Jutsu and was now standing less than an arm's length from Kakashi. He promptly went for the bell and almost touched it, when he felt someone catch his legs. Looking down, he was surprised to see it was an arm and the next second, he was dragged into the ground with only his head sticking out. As the mist cleared, he glared at the Jounin who stood before him with an amused smile on his face. That was a good fight, Sasuke. You almost got the bells too. I must say your battle strength is much stronger than that of a genin. I suppose I must go look for the others now. Kakashi said the last part out loud. He already knew where the others were. While he was able to find out Sakura easily, finding Naruto was quite the hard part. He just shuddered imagining Naruto's strength if Sasuke himself was thing strong. Let me out, this instant, yelled Sasuke. He was humiliated at being done like this. Kakashi hummed as he got into a thinking pose for a second. I think not. He then stated with an eye smile. Sasuke stared at him stupidly, but he gave it no thought. He would get out it one way or another. From the sidelines, both Naruto and Sakura had spectated the entire fight. Naruto was extremely impressed by the fact that Sasuke was able to hold his own for that long against someone like Kakashi. He could tell that Kakashi barely put any effort into the fight, but he was sure even Sasuke didn't fight to his full extent. It was after all common for a shinobi to not reveal all his cards. While he was watching the two fight, he was certain even he would be hard-pressed to defeat Kakashi all on his own. If only he could convince Sasuke and Sakura to work with him. Suddenly his eyes widened as a realization struck him. That's what he meant. Konoha has never had a three-man genin squad and it never will. Kakashi-sensei wants to see if we are willing to work together as a team for the good of the village. Naruto thought. He was amazed at the simplicity of the test but also slightly embarrassed that he couldn't figure it out earlier. Now that he thought about it, their sensei did state that he wanted to check if we could work as a team. Remembering that made him feel further stupid. On the other hand, Sakura had an amazed look on her face on seeing Sasuke's strength. She was amazed that at his age, Sasuke could be so strong, and in her delusional world, she believed it was a close match, and if not for Kakashi's last move, her love would have certainly gotten the bells. However, she suddenly found her surroundings changing, as she now saw Sasuke lying dead on the ground with large holes in his chest and blood flowing out of his body. She let out a loud and terrifying scream and fell unconscious on seeing the image of her loved one dead. Oh wow! What did she even see to be so scared? Kakashi thought, standing behind with a slightly confused look on his face. Well, there's only one person left now. I sure want to see how strong he has gotten. Kakashi was about to move towards Naruto when he felt the large build-up chakra. As he turned towards the source, his eyes widened in disbelief when he saw Sasuke's entire body covered in thin Raiton chakra. Moreover, he had also managed to free himself and was now standing on 2 feet, albeit slightly panting. He has already mastered 2 chakra manipulation at his age, thought a startled Kakashi. That took more chakra than I anticipated, thought Sasuke as he took deep breaths. He didn't even move a muscle when he noticed Naruto appear beside him, seemingly out of nowhere. You sure don't make things easy, Sasuke, commented Naruto, as he kept his eyes in Kakashi's direction. He knew very well where the Jounin was. Kakashi thought about apprehending the 2 genins immediately but decided to give them a chance to regroup. Shut up, loser. It's not like you've been doing anything, replied Sasuke, slightly irritated. If there was one thing which Sasuke envied about the Senju was his unnaturally large chakra reserves. Well, you're in no shape to fight all on your own. And Sakura is already unconscious. Also, I think there's a hidden meaning behind this test. If you think logically, Konoha has never had any 3-man squads. Teamwork has always been the most essential concept preached in our village, and I think that's what Kakashi-sensei wants to test, whether we can work together as a team. Naruto whispered. I don't need anyone's help. Sasuke replied, sharply glaring at the blonde with his Sharingan. Don't be stupid, Sasuke. You and I both know that you used quite a lot of chakra in getting out of the ground. And Kakashi-sensei hadn't gone easy on you in that taijutsu spar. You won't be able to get the bells on your own. And you know very well that my reasoning regarding the hidden test was sound. You're not going to achieve your dream if you don't even pass this test. Naruto replied with slightly elevated tone and narrowed eyes. Regaining his strength, a bit, Sasuke now stood straight beside Naruto. Thinking about his words, Sasuke couldn't find any flaw in Naruto's reason and had to say it sounded practical. Fine. Let's go with your plan. Can you wake Sakura up? Questioned Sasuke. Naruto nodded and the 2 swiftly proceeded to her location. Kakashi smirked, now sitting atop a tree branch. Looks like they figured it out. Now, all that's left to see is how well they perform together, thought Kakashi. Naruto and Sasuke were now sitting deep into the woods with an unconscious Sakura beside them. Naruto placed his left palm on Sakura's forehead and a green-colored chakra covered his palm. Even though he wasn't proficient in using medical ninjutsu, he could still treat minor cuts and injuries. While Sakura was caught in a genjutsu initially, but she had passed out due to mental trauma. And judging by the fact that she was now beginning to stir, Naruto assumed it wasn't too major. Sasuke-kun, muttered Sakura as she stirred on the ground. A few seconds later she opened her eyes and found Naruto sitting beside her and Sasuke a few meters away. She immediately looked around herself, frantically wondering if this was a dream. Realizing that everything was normal, she breathed a sigh of relief on learning that Sasuke was alright. Naruto dumbly shook his head at the blind devotion the girl had towards the Uchiha. It was certainly mind-boggling at times. Deciding not to waste any further time, Naruto explained his plan to the 2 of them and he was glad that both were on board with it. A little over 20 minutes had passed since Naruto and Sasuke had disappeared from the clearing in the middle. Kakashi guessed the 3 would be coming anytime soon, since there wasn't much time left until noon. His suspicion was proven right when 2 Naruto jumped in front of him. Oh, it's your turn now, eh? The other 2 couldn't do much. deciding to try your own luck now? Kakashi asked lazily, as his attention was once again planted in his books. We'll see, Kakashi-sensei, stated both the Naruto, as they began performing different hand seals quickly. Doton, Doryu Taiga, said one of the Naruto as he placed both his hands on the ground. Immediately, the ground below Kakashi's feet transformed into a river of mud and he was forced to jump into the air. Suetun, Suishuha, yelled the other Naruto almost immediately, as he materialized large volumes of water from thin air. Everyone else's eyes widened on witnessing the feat, as the large volume of water went straight towards Kakashi at high speed. He was further alarmed when Sasuke appeared beside the blonde, directed his hand towards Naruto's Suetun jutsu and shot a stream of electricity towards it. It's hard to believe, these two are mere genin. They both could give any jounin a run for their money in ninjutsu. And I'm sure they haven't even revealed their entire strength yet, thought Kakashi, still shocked at what he was seeing. The very next second, the large wave of water engulfed him, and his body jerked up countless times cause of the Raitun chakra mixed in the jutsu. The force of the jutsu pushed him back quite a bit while also destroying a few trees in the process. Once the jutsu died down, he hit the ground with a resounding thud. As he got up in tremendous pain, he panted harshly as he fell on his knees. He felt a strange sensation as he sensed the surrounding around him change slightly, displaying him the forest around him caught in an uncontrollable fire. Guess, this is Sakura's doing. Although, not very proficient, the genjutsu would definitely trick a simple genin, thought Kakashi tiredly. As he somehow made a single-hand seal and released chakra to break the genjutsu, he now noticed that all three of them were now standing before him. He smiled briefly under his mask on noticing the two bells in Sasuke's hands. Seeing as it was all done, he sat down on the ground, allowing his body to recover from the attack he just took. Well, sensei? Asked Naruto with a wide smile. I guess, I shouldn't be surprised that you managed to figure out the hidden meaning behind the test. You all pass, said Kakashi with his traditional eye smile. Naruto and Sakura immediately jumped up in joy with large smiles on their faces while Sasuke simply turned away from the other three. But, Kakashi could see the slight smirk on the genin's face. I suppose they aren't hopeless completely when it comes to working as a team, he thought. And thus, began the tumultuous journey of Team 7, which would go on to leave an everlasting mark in the history of the shinobi world. Few months later, about 4 months had passed since Kakashi had passed Team 7. Since then, the team had gone on several missions as an official team of Konoha. However, none of them were even slightly pleased with the kind of missions they were given. Most of them included helping the civilians inside the village in their day-to-day chores, protecting important civilian figures within the village, and the one they hated the most was chasing a black cat named Tora. There were very few topics which everyone agreed to, in Team 7. But all were in favor of the fact that the cat named Tora had to die. Though it was pet, it acted as a feral feline most of the time and would frequently run around the village, hiding from his owner. The only reason the cat wasn't put down was because it belonged to the wife of the fire daimyo. It really irked all the genin teams in the village. Team 8, which consisted of Hinata, Kiba and Shino, had also passed their genin test conducted by their sensei, Kurenai Yuhi. She was known throughout the shinobi world as the genjutsu mistress of Konohagakure. As her moniker suggested, her main forte was genjutsu and her skill was often compared to the genjutsu prowess of the Uchiha clan's Sharingan. Team 10 consisted of Shikamaru, Ino and Choji, which was led Asuma Sarutobi, the son of the Sandaime Hokage. The man was once part of the 12 guardian shinobi, who were the elite group of people that guarded the fire daimyo. It was suffice to say that the current generation of genins were all led by powerful and respectable jounins. With all the teams busy with their missions and team training, the genins hardly got time to get together. Yet once in a week or so, they met each other in the barbecue shop, mainly on Choji's insistence. Despite Team 7 having relatively good team chemistry during the missions, Naruto felt slightly saddened that Sasuke still chose to ignore everyone else. But, he hadn't given up hope yet. During their test, he was sure Sasuke had enjoyed battling Kakashi together and he wanted to make Sasuke realize that they could accomplish anything if they worked together. Currently, Team 7 was standing in the Hokage's office awaiting another mission. As usual, Kakashi stood beside his team reading his book blatantly. It was a couple of weeks after their test that he learned that the book read by Kakashi was written by Jiraiya. Surprised at that fact, he had once decided to peek at it from one of Jiraiya's collection. And he would never forget that day cause of the hell his mother had brought down on everyone at the Senju compound. Apparently, his mother absolutely loathed those books and so did most of the women in Konoha. He felt a little terrifying on seeing his Aji-chan get beaten up by his mother, yet again. From that day forth, he swore he would never go near any of those books, unless he faces the same fate as Jiraiya. Gigi, come on. Enough of these silly missions. We need to step out of the village too. We haven't even gotten a single mission higher than D rank, whined Naruto. Despite knowing that Naruto was close to the Hokage, Sakura still found it hard to believe that he would speak to the Sandaime in such a manner. Sasuke shrugged his shoulders, not really caring about his attitude. He had known Naruto from a very young age and the blonde had always been like this. Loud and brash. But, he did agree with Naruto's current statement. Naruto. Watch who you're speaking to. You guys are genins and are only expected to be doing D-rank missions until your Jounin sensei makes a request otherwise, berated Iruka, who stood beside the Hokage. He was generally the one who picked the missions for the genin squads. But, Iruka sensei, come on. You know we can handle a simple C-rank mission. Plus, how does the village expect us genins to grow, if we don't get any exposure to the outside world? Naruto questioned with a smirk. Iruka promptly became quiet as he could not think of any reply. He couldn't even say that Team 7 wasn't strong enough since he knew otherwise. Hiruzen chuckled at the mildly heated exchange between the two and pondered over it for a while. What do you think, Kakashi? Sarutobi finally asked the Jounin sensei. Kakashi eyed his team momentarily and turned towards the Hokage. I think they are ready, Hokage-sama. They will be able to handle a simple C-rank mission outside the village. I see. If you deem them worthy enough, I guess we can assign them one, don't you think, Iruka? Sarutobi glanced towards the Chunin and him nod hesitantly. Iruka then proceeded to walk out of the room and then came back a few minutes later accompanying a bespectacled old man with a large beard and dark eyes. The old man wore a sleeveless V-neck shirt with an obi, pants and a pair of sandals. He also carried a towel around his neck and wore a pointed hat on his head. The most peculiar thing, however, was the large bottle of sake that he had in his hand. The Sandaime then excused the Chunin Academy teacher who then went back to the academy. Tazuna-san, Team 7 here will be accompanying you back to the land of waves and ensure your security. Stated the Hokage. The man named Tazuna eyes the little kids for a few seconds scoffed. What? These brats? They don't look like anything. Replied Tazuna bluntly, while also taking a swig of his sake. Hey! Who do you think you are calling us weak? And no one other than Tazuna was surprised that it was Sakura who spoke first. You heard what I said, little girl. I don't think you kids will be able to protect me, the master builder from the land of waves, boasted Tazuna proudly. Sakura wanted to beat the man for calling their team weak but stopped when she felt her sensei's hand on her shoulders. She looked back to see Kakashi shake his head. I assure you, there'll be more than enough, Tazuna-san. You did say it's only an escort that you need and stated it's more than a C-rank mission. I would assign you higher ranked shinobi if the mission rank was higher. Unless you're not telling us something. The Sandaime asked with a speculative gaze. Tazuna straightened up a bit on hearing the question. No. Of course not. Well, if the Hokage says this team is good enough, I suppose I should just go with it. Tsunade replied. But everyone had seen the slight nervousness in the man's voice, albeit Sakura. That's good then. Team 7, I suppose this your first C-rank mission as per your request. Sarutobi said with a small smile, looking at Kakashi's team. And Tsunade-san. You may go and wait by the main gate. Team 7 will rendezvous with you shortly once they are packed with the necessities. Naruto, Sasuke, Sakura, get going and pack for 3 days of travel. We will meet at the eastern gate in 10 minutes. Everyone understood? Kakashi asked. Soon enough, Team 7 had left the Hokage's office to pack for the mission and Tsunade was escorted to the gate by an umbu. However, Sarutobi's keen gaze had not missed the slight change in Tsunade's tone. Moreover, he was uncertain of the conditions in the Land of Waves since the Fire Nation or their village had no dealings with them currently. Usagi, get me Team 8 over here as soon as possible. Sarutobi commanded. While he was confident in Team 7's abilities, he did not wish to put them in any unnecessary danger. Moreover, it would be beneficial to have a team on standby for support if something went awry. A purple-haired umbu suddenly materialized in front of the Hokage who knelt before her leader. Hi, Hokage-sama. She replied and disappeared from Sarutobi's view. Eastern gate of Konohagakure no Sato, also the main gate. After 10 minutes, all the members of 7 had regrouped with backpacks, having packed all the necessities for their travel to the Land of Waves. This was the first time since any of these genin were traveling to that land but were more excited on prospect of finally embarking on a C-rank mission outside the village. Naruto wore a black jumpsuit with a gray haori which had the symbol of the Senju clan engraved on the back and a pair standard shinobi sandal. He also had a blue backpack. Sasuke wore white short, blue turtleneck t-shirt with the Uchiha clan symbol on its back and had a black backpack. And Sakura wore a red cheapao dress with short sleeves and had a light yellow-colored backpack. Everyone ready? Kakashi asked. On the side, Tsunade was still unsure whether these kids would be able to protect him from the dangers that were awaiting him in his homeland, but he supposed he would just have to take the Hokage's word for it. He only hoped everything went according to plan. Still, he was glad to be able to secure a team of shinobi for protection. Once Kakashi received nods from all the members of his team, he looked towards Tsunade. Tsunade-san, please stay in the middle. Naruto will stay in the front, Sakura on the right, Sasuke on the left and I will stay behind you. That way, if anything happens, we'll be able to ensure your safety first. After clearing that with the bridge builder, Team 7 and Tsunade left the village and made their way towards the Land of Waves at civilian pace.
That's it for this video. I hope you all enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and follow me on my other social media accounts. Anime God here, and I'm signing off.